Just a quick note here about this YouTube video. If you're watching this on YouTube, we had a big old glitch that I didn't find out about until afterwards, which was my video was a complete mess. In fact, it didn't even properly record it, but there was a bit of a backup that's extremely low fidelity, but more disappointingly, it's incredibly out of sync. And while I did some attempted work to continually sync up my visuals with the audio, it is very off. There's a lot of audio drift, so I apologize. More importantly, Cory's audio and visual is perfect. So, of course, this happened with one of our biggest guests we've had on the show, but at least we do have his visual here. So please enjoy the show. Welcome back to another Float Conference special episode. Really excited to have Cory Allen on today. We had a really cool conversation that spanned a lot of different avenues, and just a cool human being, what a great person, and I think I mentioned it quite a bit at the end, but a very friendly guy who wants to meet all of us at the Float Conference. So for everybody who's going, definitely go say hi to Cory. Really incredible human being, and really can't wait to see him on stage as well. If you're going to the Float Conference, you might be new to figuring out all the different things, all the different components that go into starting your business. Let me just say that Helm is a product that we absolutely highly recommend on the podcast. The Float Shop has been using it, and they are a wonderful advertiser for us. HelmBot is where you want to go to see the scheduling software that will schedule your float tanks, classes, LMTs, all that good stuff. And I mean, just things that are so specific to floating as well, to your float center, like keeping track of your metrics, water levels, specific gravity, temperature, all that stuff is captured in Helm. You have a log of it. And peroxide levels, of course, is an important one that we're testing throughout the day. So Helm is a piece of software that you should, if you're starting your business, book a session with them right away, talk with them, make sure it's a good fit for you. My guess is it absolutely will be. Again, we're big fans of HelmBot. And if you already use Helm, a couple cool things, or a couple important things. One is just to know that opt-ins are now required for texting. This is not a Helm specific thing. This is across the country, new rules, maybe laws even. Basically, what you need to do is make sure that you at least have verbal confirmation from your clients to send them text messages, or else when you create an account, it will automatically not opt them in. When they log in, it will now ask them to opt in, but they have to click that option the next time they log into Helm. So you might see a large decrease in text messages going out, and just talk to your clients and make sure you get that confirmation so you can click that on and make sure it's all legal and above board. Also, just one other quick cool thing, LMTs can now manually start a client after the start time. I don't know if this has come up for you or not. It definitely comes up for us at the shop, where a client comes in, maybe they're running late, a walk-in, something like that, and then we want to add it in later. Now the LMT can actually do that themselves and put them on the schedule, which is really cool. And then we just have more accurate scheduling. So that's perfect, which is great for when you're doing payouts and all of that. Also want to shout out the FTA. The FTA, of course, is going to be at the Float Conference. We love the FTA as well. They are the group that is helping out the entire industry, whether it's with research information. Really excited for some information that's going to come out at the Float Conference this year, as well as just helping you start your float center as well. A huge part of what the FTA exists for is to help start your center, make sure that you're successful, make sure that you're doing everything legally above board, all of that stuff. And they have a lot of resources to check out. So definitely check out the Float Association at flotation.org. Great nonprofit organization that's helping us. And I highly, highly encourage you to sign up as a member too, to contribute a little bit of money every month into what they're doing so that they can help our industry as a whole. Same thing like with LMTs. We saw LMTs be something that's incredibly fringe not that long ago, to becoming a recognized professional organization that is, billing through insurance, and all of that is recognized as sound science for wellness. So please contribute to flotation.org, to the FTA. They're wonderful, and can't wait to see everybody there. Oh, speaking of which, there is like a private little FTA members only get together. So sign up for the FTA before the Float Conference so we can all get together and have some snacks and perhaps a drink at the Float Conference. All right, really excited to play this episode with Cory. Let's go. Welcome Welcome back to another episode of Art of the Float, where float centers thrive. My name is Dylan, and I own the float shop in Portland, Oregon with my wife Sandra for, I think, coming up on 12 years. Might be 13, can't remember anymore. But today I'm really excited that we have another Float Conference special guest. This one, a very special guest. Cory Allen is joining us. Welcome to the pod, Cory.
Hey, thank you very much, man. Glad to be here.
And Cory and I just had a really fun conversation before recording about a whole bunch of things. I'm really excited to dive into his life and everything he does and offers. Just one of the funny things is that he has been recording for 9-10 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the podcast,
Podcasting, yeah. Which I think is kind of before everybody ended up having a podcast.
Yeah.
So you were ahead of the curve on that. How did you decide to start a podcast, and where did you even, what did you feel like you wanted to share with the world?
Yeah, I mean, it basically happened very organically. So back then, as you said, it was definitely the Wild West of podcasting. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend who had a podcast that was pretty successful at the time. And so he would ask me to come onto his podcast as a guest all the time. And so I did that. I was actually the first guest on his podcast, a guy named Aubrey Marcus that started On It and all these other companies.
Okay, yeah, we know.
Oh, cool. So I would go on his podcast all the time back in the day. And then eventually, his fans would reach out to me and they're like, hey, you should start a podcast too. And I was like, okay, I'll do that just for fun. And I started doing it. It just grew really quickly because I started off with a fan base, and then within 3 years, I think I got written up in the New York Times as well, and so it just kind of grew really fast. And as you said, there was a lot of space in the industry back then, and you could talk about whatever you wanted, whatever your interests were. And go ahead.
That would be my follow-up question: is why was Aubrey having you on? What was he finding? What insights did you have that he found interesting that then your audience was like, hey, why don't you have your own podcast?
Yeah.
Was there any kind of aim, or was it just open-ended?
We were talking about, it's a funny story is that I don't remember how we got connected, but he was trying to figure out how to set up his audio gear, his podcasting gear. Yeah. And I was like, I'll help you set it up. At the time, I had my own production studio, and it was like, I'll help you set it up. We're into similar things. And so I went over to his house and just set up his gear on his kitchen table. And again, this is 12 years ago or something like that. And so we just, and On It, the company started, I think it was a year old at that point. Wow. And he took me over to their office where it was only I don't know, 600 square feet, maybe, 2 employees other than him, and they only had 3 products, So I've definitely seen it from the beginning. It was wild, the journey. But anyway, point is that we had the gear set up, and then I said, let's test it real quick. And so we both got on the mic, I hit record, and we started talking, and we just kept talking, and that was the first episode of his podcast. And so, we were talking about consciousness, about psychedelics, about just Eastern wisdom traditions, all those type of things.
And you said that you've been, sorry, again, I'm referencing a pre-record conversation, but you've been practicing meditation for, did you say 20, 25 years?
25, yeah. About 25
years.
Yeah.
And how did you even find yourself there?
Just through necessity. Yeah, through necessity, curiosity, chance. I don't know, random chance. Shout out to randomness.
Nice.
It was just the environment I was in at the time. It was a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension, and so I was looking for a way to, I think, ease that feeling of tension and anxiety while also getting more in tune with my own inner life and expanding my consciousness. And so I was reading Western philosophy first, and then that stuff led me to various Eastern wisdom traditions, which then at the time, this is the late 90s, and so there was no Google, there was no YouTube videos on meditation, there was nothing like that. It was literally get a weird esoteric book on meditation that doesn't talk about, there's no steps,
Yeah.
it's just like vague descriptions of states and things like that. And I would
Interesting.
like
Okay.
read that and try and just
Huh.
understand the like the foundational concepts, and like that led me to reading like commentaries of the Pali Canon, like what is meditation, where did it originate from, like why is this a thing, how did like Buddha come up with this thing. And so that's what I was, and I loved like Zen too, because I was way into Nietzsche at the time. And so Zen Buddhism also, or Zen in particular, also spoke to me a lot because it appeared to be much more intellectual and sterile, which turned out later to not be a great way to start your path. But so I basically just learned out of books like that.
Why?
What's up?
Why not so?
Yeah, because you have to open the heart before you open the mind. That's a good approach.
Okay.
And I had someone, you might actually know who this is. So people don't really know who this is these days, but I was briefly mentored by Robert Anton Wilson, the author that wrote the Illuminati's trilogy and Cosmic Trigger. He was sort of like a Terence McKenna
Oh
type
wow.
figure.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
So people who know who he is love
I
him.
think I nice. I think I know him based off YouTube videos about him actually.
Yeah, that makes sense.
From Ford.
But yeah. Anyway, so all that stuff. It just it all led me there, and it was interesting. Is that back in the day of reading in books about meditation, there was no like links to get to another web page, but like the link in those days was
Right.
like one, like Zen master would mention another one or something, and you'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go find a book by that guy. Like
Hmm.
that was the hyperlink of the day.
Totally. Nice. That's awesome. And then you have to go to the bookstore, go to the library,
Totally.
actually find it or order it
Yep.
to make it happen.
Yep. Totally.
And so do you know what was driving your interest at that time? Like what was, I feel like every action needs like a push and a pull for us to make a choice to do something. And this, it seems like you kept having that pull to continue. What was that? There must have been some kind of a zeitgeist in your life driving you or pushing you in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was, yeah, wanting to explore, like wanting to understand why I felt the way I did, and recognizing, I think
Mm.
early on, I just had an intuitive awareness that there was more to my mind and my inner life than I was aware of. And so I was seeking meditative practices because I understood at the time, like, that's supposed to help you feel like peaceful, whatever that means. Like I didn't, it's like that that means relaxed. Like that's what I want to feel because I'm freaking out here. I'm constantly like full of
Yeah,
tension.
okay.
And so I was like trying to go towards that, but I also had a fascination with, things that were mystical and like esoteric at the time. And then I was just obsessed with the idea of consciousness. Like even just the hard problem of consciousness was fascinating to me. Just thinking about like how is it possible that a collection of cells, which are readily available also out in the world, somehow when organized together in such a way creates the online awareness of a sentient being. And so I really liked exploring that as well. So it's a mixture of like the needing kind of the medicinal aspect of it to undo and let go and become grounded and less reactive, and then the voyaging mentality of trying to understand out of fascination what my consciousness was all about.
I love it. I not that I want to make this about me, but you're just making me reflect on. I was raised Buddhist, and so there was chanting constantly, bringing myself and honestly my parents into a meditative state. So I feel like I went the opposite direction, and not to say that like Carl Jung isn't a spiritual person, he definitely
Mm.
is, but I found myself in young adulthood reading about Freud and Jung and reading their books, which I feel like two of us going the opposite directions of where we started for similar
Yeah,
purposes.
for sure.
Of mine was like, why why are we doing this? What and but still exploring consciousness. I mean, that's the fundamental of what everybody's looking at.
Yeah, totally. At the end of the day, it's just
Young in
about like
particular was my
finding
favorite.
finding what gives you balance. Like to me, Like I was
Hmm.
always so overly intellectual, and I was trying to find a way to like move and to, like drop the ego into the heart a little bit, and perhaps you came from a
Hmm.
more heart-centered place and you were like, I'm ready to blast off on the intellectual side of things.
Funny. So you were dealing with anxiety at the
Yeah,
time. You were
yeah.
you were wound up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that your meditation practice and your research helped help bring you down and center
Oh
yourself?
yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, it was like
I'm, s- I'm assuming since you've been practicing for 25 years, there's
like no, still
some
still
benefits.
waiting. I'm just very committed.
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's totally transformative, and continues to be. I think at the beginning, what I would
Okay.
do is like, again, remember I was reading out of weird books, but I would just like lay down on the bed and close my eyes and like take a breath and exhale. And when I exhaled, I would try and relax all the muscles in my body, like as much as I could. And I would
Mm.
take another breath in and I would exhale and try and relax my muscles even more and more and more. And without reading about it or even knowing it, I was doing like a scanning practice and like a labeling practice of
For sure.
recognizing where the
Hmm.
tension is, trying to identify like what's coming from it, like what feelings are arising. And so I would do that like every night whenever I'd get in bed at night, like do that for, like 20 or 30 minutes, something like that. And I begin to notice the more that I did that, the more at ease, like the actual physical self
Mm.
began to relax. And whenever that happened, that of course
Okay.
then created an internal spaciousness, which was the earliest steps of being able to look inward and create space between,
Mm.
thought and reaction and being able to enter that stream of mindful awareness.
May I ask, were there deliberate changes that you made or things that you noticed about yourself that were because you were able to get relaxed, centered, look inward, that then you modified your life in some way or changed your perceptions in some way that you can
Yeah,
identify?
I'm still doing it. Yeah, yeah. The earliest ones were really realizing that I had control over what I said, how I acted in certain situations, how I reacted to people in certain situations.
Okay.
I think prior to that raise of awareness, I think most people feel like this without any inner investigation. You are in a perpetual state of reaction. And a lot of us are just stuck
Mm.
in like a low grade flight or fight mode all the time. We're just in this
Sure.
momentum of just trying to deal with one thing to the next, and we don't feel like we have any like authorship over our own minds and our own the way that we present and the way that we express ourselves
Mm.
in the world. And becoming aware of that made me realize that one of the defense mechanisms I'd cultivated was trying to be very sarcastic and you know like I was like funny but mean spirited in my like responses
Yeah.
to a lot of things because it's
Yeah.
like a way to, of course, try and feel like superior, safe, but then
Hmm.
also wrap it in
Hmm.
humor so you're like not being an asshole. Like it would
Yeah.
appear. And I realized that that didn't make other people feel good and it didn't make me feel good. And so
Yeah.
I realized I could stop that behavior, and like just start changing how I was,
Cool.
being in life. And um, as I began to become more aware of the arising impulses and the arising thoughts that were coming to my mind prior to, turning them to action and getting a deeper look, essentially, I started noticing that, like, a month ago, I wasn't able to see as deeply into what was arising. Now I can see
Mm.
even more deeply. Now, 2 months
Wow.
later, I can see even more deeply, and I'm even more self
Hmm.
aware. And that was really inspiring to me because it was like keeping this track, being able to kind of look back and notice, like, wow, like my mind is changing and expanding for the positive, and then being so like I don't know, I'm a very like determined and uh, uh, like driven person, and so then that became the goal. Is like, okay, how far can we
Mm.
take this? You know,
Oh,
and I'm
interesting.
still working on it today.
I mean, I can only imagine it's an eternal. There is no end game,
Yes,
right? And um, practicing presence. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? Is being present with the moment and with your feelings, everything that's coming up, your physiology. And I feel like we are such habitual creatures, and we we develop our safety mechanisms as kids. Sounds like for you and for me, that sarcasm part keeps us safe and protects us, hurts the people around us, but it keeps our shell up, and um, but uh, but it also keeps us without a certain amount of presence. We have to be checked out because we wouldn't feel good if we were aware of how we were treating people or what was going on underneath our shell and our vulnerabilities about ourselves. But um, yeah, I'm gonna just steer away from that for a little
sure.
while here. I mean, still on with the presence, but I've had this kind of wild idea for a while about how I think animals are the most habitual. It's really hard for, I think, an animal to have conscious decisions about themselves. You know, self-awareness is very, sketchy whether how much they have of that. And I think the greatest gift we have as humans is how much presence we can assert over ourselves, which means we don't necessarily have to do our pre-programmed um, I don't know, however we're programmed, whether it's genetics, nurture, all that stuff. Um, but then we have the ability to slide into habit very easily as well and only have blips of consciousness, not really remember what happened during that conversation or what that person said or um, choosing how you behave, let alone stillness, practicing presence with yourself and that inward looking, which can also happen while you're having that conversation as well. But I just think um, that practice of presence is the greatest gift we have, and the fact that we can have so much, and that it can kind of be like a muscle as well. I think most people working out tend not to ever be done. Like, yep, I got it. It fades away if you're not practicing. It's a muscle.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's free. I mean, that's the funniest thing about it to me is that like it's literally free, and it only takes like 10 to 15. You can do it in 10 to 15 minutes a day. You know, it's wild
So if it's free, how come everybody's not doing
because we our people are terrified to not avoid what they're feeling. People are. It's a horrifying thought for people, even on a subconscious level, to look at
it? Mm-hmm.
unfiltered reality, the unfiltered reality about themselves and life in itself. It's like, if you get one glimpse of it, it's like, what is life really? It's like, oh, I'm going to get old, I'm going to get sick, and I'm going to die, and everything else is going to die. Like,
Yeah.
well, that was the truth for me for one day. I'll go back to, scrolling or whatever, and I totally get
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I
right,
totally get it. But,
right.
I think um, it's really too harrowing for people, I think, a lot of times, or they think it's going to be to look inward. They
Right.
think it will
And
be.
and I think oh sorry.
No, no, and I was just going to say that, but then if they do and they are able to get through that barrier, then they see that that's actually how you let all of that fear out.
Right. And that's how we arrive at floating.
Yes.
That's exactly the conversation we have with so many people is 60 or 90 minutes alone with my own thoughts with me. No, thank you. We get that a lot, way more than I'm going to be in a small space, which most float tanks these days aren't even
Right.
small. But yeah, being with yourself is a very scary idea. Just anecdotally, there I think it was three sisters all floating at the same time. Um, Two of the sisters looked at their phones after their floats, and they were getting Instagram stories and messages sent from their middle, or actually youngest sister the entire time. So the youngest one would get into their float. That they'd have the monkey mind, I assume, get annoyed with it, get out, scroll, like literally in the float tank, scroll, send, and then go back into their float, pop back up. And that felt, I mean, it was funny. We had laughs about it for sure, but that was scary.
Yeah.
The idea that was a little
It's
spooky.
that's really
But
it's
have
just
you
tragic.
have you stepped into a float
Yeah,
tank?
that's tragic.
I know, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
reality of it. Yeah,
Um,
and so much as it whether it's the dopamine drip feeding us that there is no encouragement to spend that even 15 minutes by yourself. It's always pick up that phone, get to the screen, get that
Yeah,
drip, and it's all surface level.
totally, totally.
Sorry about it.
Yeah, no, it's the avoidance of that is crazy. But yeah, no, I love floating. I think it's amazing. I'm such a huge fan, and I've been a fan for a long time. And before we were rolling, I was telling you how, I mean, at least 15 years ago, way back in the day before float centers, my first floats were in a random person's house that I found online. That just a weird little web page. Uh,
Perfectly safe.
yeah,
Perfectly
bro.
fine.
Yeah, come on, come take a shower in my bathroom, and then take your clothes off and hop in this box
Right.
for an hour. Everything will be fine. Um, yeah, that was and actually that was fun, and everything was fine. But I didn't tell you that
Right.
before that. So I actually learned about floating from John, like reading Programming the Meta Programmer and getting hearing about John
Okay.
Lilly and stuff. And this was way back before I
Okay.
had the opportunity to try one. So I really wanted to try one for years before I was able to find one.
Yeah.
And what I used to do was I was like, I want to experience this somehow. And so I would fill up the bathtub at home and like turn the lights off, like put a towel under the door so that it was like as dark as possible.
Oh,
And I would
interesting.
leave the water running like 10% on warm. And then I would prop
Or we
open the
told
little
you.
stopper, like with just a tiny little thing so it was draining at the same speed the water was coming in. And then I would get like
Yeah.
a wet washcloth and put it over my eyes and then lay down and try and like create my own little float tank. And it was, I mean, it's pretty rad for what it was.
I mean, so you could spend as much time in there basically as you
Yeah.
wanted. You you were still with yourself. You were quiet. How was it different when you actually got into a float
I mean, it was
tank?
a lot better.
What did
It
you
was
notice?
it was a lot better.
No way,
Yeah.
really? Okay.
The one this is kind of weird. Like this is interesting. It's just reminding me of all these old memories. But another thing I used to do in there was to get a wet washcloth, and I would also put it over my entire face. And so, like, I was being suffocated by like, you can't breathe out of the cloth very well. But what it did
Yeah.
was I was like forcing myself to learn how to breathe like super slowly and like relax my nervous system into it. So I was like, that way you're like, you have to take these breaths. And of course you freak out because you feel like you're drowning. But I would just like
Exactly.
teach myself
Right.
to like relax into it and learn how to just breathe long and deep for like long periods of time.
And what book taught
That
you to
was
do
just me
this?
being weird. I was just
That was you.
yeah. I did all sorts of. I used to just experiment on my mind and all the time back in the day and just see what
That is
would happen.
hardcore. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we're talking about floating, but that actually makes me want to steer another direction here. First, may I ask if it's okay? May I ask
So
how
I'm
old you are?
41. Yeah.
41, sweet, and I'm 40. I feel like so many people curious about the mind are doing psychedelics in probably around their 20s, maybe early 30s. And I'm a strong proponent of doing psychedelics, mushrooms in particular. Ayahuasca, I think, is amazing as well. Later in life as well, to kind of break up some of the roads that are paved, the cement is dry, and create new connections that I think feel so important in our youth are actually incredibly important as we get older as well. Was that ever part of your style of introspection?
Oh yeah, 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 for
And
sure. Yeah, no, especially as a uh, younger person, like even my teenage years, I was like lots of
Mm,
LSD and mushrooms and things like that, and then went on to continue that, and then with ayahuasca and various other things, and I was just again, whenever I was, especially whenever I was really young, I was just trying to do anything I could to like mess with my mind. It was like
mm.
even in like middle school, I was like, oh, I'll like smoke and breathe rubber cement at the same time and see what happens.
Wow.
It's like, well,
Okay.
that's interesting. Let's, that's a combination. Log that in the book and move on.
Nice.
But no, but
Nice.
of course, the healing and expansive properties of psychedelics are, they were, I think, a relevant part of my experience. But I, even as a kid, I always used them as like tools. Like I only had one or two times where I was like with friends just goofing off. Like mainly it was just,
Yeah.
I don't know, I was always just so fascinated with my own consciousness. And it's like, what's more interesting than just laying down and closing your eyes and like thinking for 6 hours? You know what I mean?
Nice. Nice. I can't say I do. I that was never
Mm.
my thing to for 6 hours. Although I think I always did use drugs as a tool, like as you described. It was always there was something to find or was to delve into to myself or explore was always the mission. With very few like you said with
Yeah,
friends, which is also a very special magical thing that's created bonds with friends deeper than it would have been otherwise
of
by all
course.
means.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. May I ask what your goal is for the Float Conference and for your presentation?
Yeah, just to move some tickets, man. um,
That's right. Go to floatconference.com, buy your ticket, and fly on down. And actually, come on down. Obviously, I'll be there, and Corey's going to be there. And just talking beforehand, Corey seems super excited to meet everybody, talk floating, and I think talk about anything. So please come on down and meet Corey. And if you're a fan, this is totally your
yeah,
chance. And I, Corey sounds like a very
I
friendly
will talk.
person. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
happy to. I'm excited to talk about anything. Literally, I really am.
Awesome. Yeah. As I've already discovered, we were talking a lot of audio production stuff beforehand, which was really fun. So I think there's quite a bit of
Totally.
range
Yeah,
here.
humans are fascinating
Um,
creatures. They're good to talk to. They always have something interesting to say.
I love it. It's a great attitude. So yes, so your
Yeah, yeah.
presentation.
And also, I do just to, before I get to that, like, um,
Please.
it really is. If that's one of the things I focus on a lot. Is like everyone is this incredibly deep well of like fascinating life experience and perspective, and it really is just a matter of being an open enough listener to be able to create the space for that. And like people can feel whenever you create the space for that, and that comfort is what then gives them the courage to then share who they are and like what they're really about with you. And that's why to me I find like everyone fascinating, because it is an important practice to me to just like be spacious and listen. And then it's just wild like how if you're actually focusing on the other person, it's wild what's in there. Like it's like every person I talk to, I'm like, I can't believe all that's in there. Like I just want to know more and more and more and more. you
Nice.
know but
Nice. You should you should open a float center because that's something we've talked about a lot on the podcast is people come out of floats and boy, they've just had so much time with themselves. They have so many ideas, so many introspective thoughts, and then you're
amazing.
there. And so you could just receive so
Amazing.
much from what's yeah,
That's
it's
almost like
incredible.
a good book idea. Like a premise for a book is like having, you know, taking like 1,000 interviews of people right after floats,
Oh
and
wow.
then compiling it into kind of what are the insights, the currents of mind that shift based on
Oh,
floating.
interesting.
There's your total right there, currents of mind.
All right, guys, let's crowdsource it. Let's do it. That's awesome. I
Because
love
yeah,
it.
like the collective wisdom and perspective of all these people that are fresh out of it, that's like a pretty fertile, area for thought. And also you could
It's
do it based
incredible.
in story too, which of course, readers are, that's how you draw readers through. Anyway,
Hmm.
all right, so back to the talk. So the
Yeah.
talk would be basically, yeah, I'm going to talk about my introduction into floating, like why I was drawn to it in the first place, and then I'll talk about how at the time I was studying, meditation, various mindfulness practices, and just general, little Aleister Crowley, and various things, and how I, sought out the float tanks to try and ease anxiety while exploring consciousness, and that how at the time it occurred to me in that process to apply active mindfulness and meditation tools during the flotation sessions to try and kind of synergize that work together to then reach the goals that I was seeking. And through doing those practices repetitiously, I noticed like sharp declines in anxiousness and intrusive thoughts and reactivity and all of those things. And so I'll talk through that experience, the kind of the things I did, and then the outcome of what happened after that.
Okay, excellent. I look forward to it. Are you aware of the float research that exists on floating and
Yeah,
anxiety?
I'm somewhat. I'm not
It's
surely not even a fraction of as
okay,
you or people at the float conference, but I'm aware of some of it. Yeah.
but just the fact that it exists, that like the higher your anxiety levels, the lower your, the larger the drop in
Yeah.
anxiety. Like floating, it just brings people to a zero is kind of the general idea. So your story matches really well with. It's always nice because we've always known like this is true, and then it's so nice when the research comes out and backs up our experiences,
Absolutely.
and so we'll all be excited to hear yours. Before we close out, is there anything else you want to share with the float community before seeing everybody in person?
No, not really. Just I'm looking forward to doing the talk, to coming and hanging out, and to talking with everyone in the audience about anything that they want. And yeah, that's it. I'm just looking forward to doing it and to seeing everybody.
Awesome. Well, if they would like to hear more of your lovely voice and mind, where can they where
Yeah,
can they
they
find
go
you?
to Cory-Allen.com. There's a lot of stuff there, and my all my social things are Hey Cory Allen, and I have a podcast and various things like that. So yeah, come and read things, listen to things, and
Yeah, so I would definitely encourage go to his website. It seems like all the links are there, books, podcast, Instagram, all of that. So definitely check it out, and definitely say hello to Cory in person. And just a couple quick shout outs before we wrap up here. I just want to, well, obviously thank Cory again for joining on the podcast. It was a real
yeah,
honor.
my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much. I enjoy chatting with you
Thank
quite
you.
a bit, and I'm excited to talk over beer in
Ooh,
person
yeah,
as well.
likewise. Yeah, that's one reason I'm
All
excited to
right.
go to Louisville is it's like bourbon country. So I'm
Yeah, you know what? I said beer, but you know what? It might be a little bit stiffer
yeah.
than that, now that I think about it. But yeah, we'll have fun. And I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, Helmbot, for supporting us. Thanks to the FTA, and of course, thanks to the Float Conference. It really means a lot to keep this moving here. And thanks to my other podcast hosts who are not here, but they're always here in spirit for these recordings. And yeah, until next week, gosh, I probably won't have an episode because I'll be at the Float Conference. I'll see you there.